why would I be anything else when I could be me? No, but seriously, like, I could just do me, Like, I could just live my life as me. Just whole, complete, just myself.
Hello, 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 and welcome back to Unabridged. I am your host, Don Miller, and I am so excited to begin the journey with you all in 2024. This first episode of the year is a little special for me. Well, actually, super special to me because it features somebody who means a lot to me, one of my best friends. This conversation covers a lot of interesting topics about her life and, the amazing things that she's been able to get through because of resilience. So, because of that, I really want to just get right into the episode and we'll get back into Let's Get Into It next week. So, I'm super excited to announce or launch the first leg of the Unabridged journey for 2024 with the amazing Miss Afrika Owes. Now, let's get into the interview. Okay. All right. And welcome to the next leg of the Unabridged journey. I am like super excited, and I'm probably gonna say that throughout this interview just because of who this person is. You all kind of heard my little cheesy intro already, but I am so excited about this interview because I told all my friends that at some point they're all going to be guests on the show, and Afrika is the first one to take that dive. And I'm really excited to have her on because we talked a lot about this leading up to the episode about what she wanted to talk about. Afrika actually reached out to me because she is in a major turning point right now, just turning, or when this episode comes out, you will have just turned 30 years old. So I just, number one, thank you for reaching out and wanting to be on the show. But can you tell folks, first of all, a little about who are you? Let the girls know who you are, and then we'll kind of jump into why you wanted to be on the show.
So I'm that girl, period. No. So my name's Afrika. I'm born, raised, and stayed in Harlem, uptown girl, West Side. I'm in my last semester of law school. A mom to a wonderful 4-year-old Kairos. I'm a Capricorn. What else? What are the things that people do? Is it very millennial to be like, I'm in Gryffindor? No, I'm kidding. Like,
You gotta
how
do the roll your
millennials
house.
are like, what's your Hogwarts house?
Even though I don't Harry Potter, I still think that's very telling. I still know at least enough about that. I was like, oh, I know about you, girl.
It's very millennial of us. But I guess I could talk a little bit the type of law I'm interested in. I'm interested in tax law, but honestly, I came to law school to uplift my people, uplift our people. So public interest based, but with a transactional focus on public interest, if that makes sense.
So you reached out to me and said you wanted to kind of be on the show, which I was super happy about. So talk to me about like what kind of sparked that. Like what made you kind of want to be on the show? Like what was that moment, or what were you thinking about that was like, I need to share this?
Um, so I have a serious answer and then I have my funny answer. I'll say the funny one first, but it's too many men have podcasts that are getting supported, and we need real podcasts ran by Black women being out there. That's like my half serious, half joke one. But no, I think that, well, on a serious note, I do think that I always want to support Black content creators, Black women that are educating and uplifting the voices of other Black people, especially anybody that's really focusing on local and educating folks. I really love the concept of your podcast too, like the first half being educating about what's going on in Philly politics, and then jumping into talking with different folks about their journeys. And so I think everybody so far has been natives of Philly. So it's like, and that's correct, right? So I like the concept of like, I'm talking about local Philly politics. I'm putting the people on, and then I'm also bringing people from Philly. Like it's kind of like a macro and then like a micro kind of dive into some of the things that you discussed. So I really like that concept. I really want to support my friends, and I think the show Unabridged, like our whole unedited self, I think that's just where we are in society. Like everybody's showing the back door of their lives or the backstage of their lives. So our TikToks and social media is like, get ready with me. So we're so into this, like, oh, see the full unedited like the content unedited version of myself, which is edited. And I really like that, putting that into a podcast and taking, you know, the content that we digest on TikTok when people are just, you know, being themselves, putting it in podcast form to reach a different audience who may not want to use TikTok or other social media platforms. And I think what your podcast stands for is everything that I love about you, but that I love about, I guess I love about myself as well. Like we are our whole unedited selves, and that journey to being ourselves. When we do that, we allow other people to do so. And I think that that's what your podcast does for the community, is what it does for me. And now I'm like, well, I want to share and I want people to hear what I have to say.
No, I love that. And I think, I think that I'm clearly your story is a little bit is going to be a little bit different than a lot of my other hosts because you are my real life best friend. So I kind of have seen your path, and that was really why I wanted you to be on the show because I think that your story is incredible, right? And I think we talk about it in our own personal ways and things like that, but I never really got to dive into your story with you, and kind of everything that you've been through and how you were able to still do all the amazing things that you do now. So can you just share a little bit about your story with the audience so that they kind of know a little bit more about you, and then we can kind of talk into the how, right? Because like I always say, Unabridged definitely is about what people are doing right now, but I want to talk more about like how do you even get to do that, right? Like because this it's not easy. It's not something that just comes natural to us. Like folks like yourself, especially, are amazing examples of people who like put that work in to have like this, all that people see around you. So can you just share again? Like the question was like, just share a little bit about your story and what how we got to this point.
Yeah, so as I said in the beginning, born, raised, and stayed in Harlem on the same block for 30 years. And I grew up in a single parent household, and I had the world's most amazing mom. She was super smart and very loving, very into community service. So that was kind of the backdrop of how I grew up, was in this like in a single parent home, but my mom was so big on giving back to the community. Like that phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. Like I feel like Harlem raised me because my mom was really into like the village and giving back, and everybody knew who I was. Walking around and like, oh, you Karen's daughter, that's Africa. So I think that's the best place where I think my story starts. And I've flashed forward a bit. Um, and I think where most people with the interesting part of the movie, I would say, is where I'm arrested. And I was arrested when I was 17 as part of this mass like conspiracy. This was going on all throughout Harlem at the time. The DA was just on this like gang crackdown, this Operation Crew Cut. So I was locked up. We were like one of the first groups that they did in Harlem. So it was myself and 15 other co-defendants. I was 17 at the time, and I was having conspiracy charges. I was looking at 25 years. Like my bail was $100,000. It's serious. I wound up going to Rikers, and I was on Rikers for 6 months. So, I was there and I served my time. And I know it's so hard to, like, whenever talking to people that are formerly incarcerated, I think sometimes it's hard to find a balance of where does the story start? Because you don't want to start with like, oh, I was in jail and then I came home and did these things. But like when you go to prison, that is such a pivotal moment. It is very transformative. It is like, your life before prison and then afterwards is so different. And it's true in my case. It is very, very different. Um, so at the time, so I was 17, and I I mentioned my mom was really invested in the community. So I live right across the street from my church, and I grew up in the church. So she reached out to them. She reached out to people she knew who were lawyers to see if they could advocate for me. And with that support from my community, that's really what I think made a difference in my court case. So they would pack the court for me. They would write letters on behalf to the judge. And I mean, the judge did not want me to come home. So it was a fight, but people vouched for me. People were like, look, she could move in with us. Like she doesn't have to come back to Harlem. And that was how the village looked out for me after my arrest. Like really saying, we'll make sure that she gets back on track, and like we'll get her where she needs to go. Um, so I was lucky enough to only do 6 months and 2 years probation, and eventually able to go to college where I met you, Dom. And I think a lot of people don't know this, but my first 2 years, well, first of all, me going to college was part of my release. Like the judge was like, if you don't get into college, like you're going back to jail. So it's a very different experience when all your peers are applying for college and you're being told if you don't go, you're going back. So it takes away the fun. And it's scary because I was getting a lot of rejections because at the time my case was so highly publicized in the news. So you could Google it and see it. So I'm getting all these rejections, and you have to disclose to the colleges. So I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna go back to jail if I don't get into school. But luckily, Hobart and William Smith, they did accept me and they gave me a scholarship. And that was really, I felt like it really did give me a second chance because at the time when they wrote about me in the newspaper, I think the last thing that I said to the interviewer was like, my life is over. And I really felt that way. And I truly do think that that was a pivotal moment where it was like, oh, okay, like I'm done. Like I, I was a smart girl. I had been to private schools. I always had big dreams. I always knew that I wanted to do something, whether it was like go to law school, go to the Air Force. Like I was gonna be something. Like um, even when I was in jail, like I was studying for my GED, my SATs, like something was gonna get done. Like it didn't matter what was going on. Like I was gonna come out of that situation, and I wasn't gonna be just coming home and not having an option. But it did feel at that moment like, okay, now these Ivy League dreams that I have for myself, like though that's not gonna happen anymore. Like everything's ruined. And that wasn't the case. But at the time, I don't think that I was able to see that because I was young. So I think I said a lot. I don't know if you want to ask any
No,
questions.
and I think that you when you mentioned I was like taking notes while you were writing too, while you were talking too. But I think there were so many points I was like, but this and this, but like I wanted you to keep going because I think first of all, like that all fits together. And I think the first point you mentioned, like people saying that they start their story right when they're getting out and things like that. But you were so young. It's like, well, what how much life are you really having up to when before you're 16 years old? So like that makes a lot of sense, right? And I remember, even though you did get into Hobart, it wasn't just like an easy thing afterwards. Like it was extremely controversial when you got accepted into Hobart, right? Like, so even though you kind of had made that step, it wasn't just like, oh, okay, well, now everything's going to be good and my life back on track. You really had to continue to fight even when you got there. And I really want you to talk more even just about your experience at Hobart because that'll kind of really lead us into our topic for today because you didn't just come there and go to college. Like you came in there and you really shut shit down, right? Like it was like you came in there and were extremely undeniable, right? So like talk a little bit about that. Talk about your experience, but then also like how do you go from my life is ending to I'm at my life-saving school and still being able to thrive the way that you did? Because I think anybody could have just came and see their way out, but no, cum laude this and president of this and you know what I mean. So like I think that people really need to understand the aspect of your story that even though you were going through these major traumatic instances, like you were not just surviving through them. You created amazing things around and for yourself through that time period.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me because I think sometimes I forget that. Like I'm like, oh yeah, I just went to college. Even now in law
Mm-mm.
school, like people will bring up things and they're like, she's being too modest. To backtrack, so prior to getting arrested, and I was always a smart girl, but I grew up in Harlem. I grew up in New York, and it's true. Like you grew up a little fast. Like I've been working since I was 10. I've been hustling since I was 10. Like just in terms of just paying my own bills. Like I remember my mom. I wanted a phone. My mom was like, if you want a phone, you're gonna have to pay for it. And I was like, I bet I'm gonna figure it out. Like, so whether I was shoveling snow back when it used to snow or going to the store for my grandmother and she'd be like, I'll give you $5 to go. Like I was always on that grind. And I think I grew up very, very fast. My mom was also an alcoholic. So I think that influenced a lot of the dynamic in my household as well. So I was just very grown from my age. So you said like how much life is there to live before 17? And even though I was, like now that I'm a real adult, you see like, okay, you wasn't a real adult when you were younger, but I was very much in charge of myself. I'm the oldest of my four siblings and I helped raise them. So I had a lot of responsibility at a very early age that was just not common of people my age. So like I was outside. That was like the thing that we used to do growing up. And it was probably the same in Philly, but like you just be outside, you hang out with your friends. That's what you if all you want to do. We don't have no malls. So for us, outside is a destination. So, you just you walk from uptown to downtown, east to west, like you just hanging out with your friends. And that's like life. That's what all teenagers do. You're just trying to hang out with your friends, whether you're in the suburbs or you in the city, like, that's what's going on. So, I was outside, like I was hanging out, and I got caught up, and that was the fate of so many of us. We just got caught up, and it's just the reality of living in the inner city neighborhood when it's over policed, and you have all that going on. So just wanted to add that context. And then to when I get into Hobart, so I remember I graduate. So I told you I was studying for the SATs and the GED when I was in Rikers, because I'm like, well, if I can't go back to high school, then I'm gonna get my GED, and then I'm gonna go to the Air Force. Then I'm gonna go to school. Like I had a plan. I was like plan A. Then it's like, oh no, she can go back to high school. So I was like, okay, cool. So I'll study for my SATs. So I did. I was literally studying for my SATs in jail, and I remember, like people, the other girls that were in there would be like chill. Like she got a practice exam today, so like don't nobody be on that. I don't know if I could curse, but nobody be on that shit today. Like Africa got to take a practice exam. So it was community. I think people have a perception like everybody I was in jail with was smart. They were young. I was in the adolescent wing. They were smart. We had to go to school, which is required by law. So if you're an adolescent in jail, you have to go to high school. So people in there were smart. They would be looking at the SAT stuff with me. Like I was tutoring people. We was helping each other with homework. So it was very much like a community in there. And I mean, jail is rough. I'm not gonna glorify jail and act like that. It's not like Orange is the new black. It's not all cute and peachy. Like it's rough. People are fighting in there. Like it's all sorts of craziness going on. It's very traumatic. But that said, there was still amongst the younger women, I do think there was still some sense of community in different parts, like just trying to help each other out. So, I come home, and the judge is like, you're gonna have to get into a reputable college. So you can't just go to school in the city. You're gonna have to go to school out of state. I get into Hobart. Mind you, I'm getting all these rejections. I probably applied to like 15 schools. I keep getting these rejections, and I get into Hobart. So as Hobart in another school, Hobart gave me the most money. And I remember visiting, and at first I was like, I don't really know about HWS. Like, I don't know if it's giving. Let's see. But when I literally, I remember getting out the car, and my godmother just looked at me, and she was like, this is nice. But I was trying to be like, I was so thuggish. I was like, trying not to, I was 17. So I'm like, it's all right. Like, is this all right? But deep down inside, I was like, I kind of like it over here. I liked it. It was something about getting on that campus. And I was just like, all right, this is where I'm supposed to be. And it was nothing like Harlem. It wasn't like nothing. It was vastly different. I mean, it was a lake. It was all this grass. Like it was not that many people of color, not that many Black people, but it just, I don't know if it was just spirit or whatever, but it was just what I knew that was where I needed to be at the time. And I visited other schools that weekend, and only HWS. And I went to Syracuse. Like I went to lit schools to see what the vibe was like. And then I went to HWS and was like, okay, I think this is, I feel like this is supposed to be the place for me. And because I kind of had this stipulation on my back, like if you don't go to school, and then I'm on probation my first 2 years of college. So every year, every semester I come back from school, I have to go to court and I have to show my grades. So it really did feel like life or death for me. Like if you don't do well, you are going to go back to jail. And like that was serious to me. Like I was like, I'm never gonna go back in jail. They're gonna have to get it back in blood. I would never go back to jail. So, I have this mindset, and I know I have a second chance. But it's not like I was 17. So it's not like I had this instant spark of maturity where I was like, oh, I have this second chance. I'm going to take it and run with it. I was still like kind of rebellious. And I was still kind of mad that like I had to be in jail, and like I was all in the news and my business was out there and people were judging me. So I still had this kind of rebellious attitude about it. And I was very like I think it was just, I'm gonna prove y'all, because I would read comments online and what people would say about me and what they would say about my mom, and I'm like, I'm gonna prove y'all wrong. Like, I'm not dumb. Like I know I could do well. So I think a combination of this pressure of it's either jail or college, wanting to prove people wrong, that like adolescent defiance, not having many options. And I think I remember the day before I started school, because I had to do the HEOP program. So that's when you come for the summer. my godfather called me and was like, you have a second chance to really be different. And you don't have to be Africa from the block anymore. Like you don't have to be that girl. You could go up there and reinvent yourself and like you don't have to stick to like you can kind of let this pressure go or like you could just do something different. And I don't know, I just something about that conversation really clicked for me, and I was like, you do have a second chance. Like everybody in my case that didn't settle, like that didn't accept a lesser sentence, got 10 years, 25 to life. Like these are serious charges. Like people were losing their life, and like I'm kind of being upset about college. Like I was mad that I had to go to college for the summer because I couldn't work. And I was like, oh, I gotta go to HLP for the summer. I can't, how I'ma work? They don't pay you. Like how I'ma get fly? I remember being so adamant, like, I'm about to turn down HLP because I really want to work. And my godfather is like, you not thinking about the big picture. Like this is gonna help you. You're going to this school, they offering you a scholarship, you're gonna get a good job. So I think just it clicked. I said, you know what? Like, let me get up there and let me just it's something different. They paying for it. Like, let me just go up there. So I go up for the summer and I kind of have my guard up because again, I'm thinking, people probably Googling me. I heard that people were not necessarily happy about me coming to the school. People were worried about the reputation. And I'm coming up there and I got this Harlem energy about me, like, all right, like, so I'm gonna show y'all, like, you feel away now, like, I'm gonna make you eat your words. Like, you feel away about me, now I'm gonna make you, now you're gonna feel stupid because I'm gonna do it. I'm not only am I gonna do it good, I'm gonna do it better than you, and I'm gonna be gracious about it. I'm not even gonna rub it in your face. So I think that young energy that came in kind of helped. But then once I got there, so I'm taking the classes and I'm doing the work, and all of a sudden I'm getting feedback from my professors like, oh, this is excellent writing and this is really good. I'm getting A's. And prior to that, like again, I was a good student, but I kind of was like in high school, I'm like phasing out. I'm kind of thinking like, oh, maybe I'm not as smart as I thought. But I get to college and I'm taking the science classes, I'm getting A's, I'm enjoying the material. I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like I like what I'm learning and I love the lake and I like it's peaceful. And I
Mhm.
realized that was the feeling that I felt when I got to HWS. When I said I came to campus and I was like, it just felt right. It was peace because my whole life prior to HWS, I think I just had lived in so much chaos. I had an alcoholic mother. I was the oldest. I took on the parent role. I'm running the streets. I'm getting locked up. I'm in all this drama. Like, and when I got to HWS, I was at peace. I didn't have any of that. And I felt like I could kind of just be myself and I didn't need the perception or the weight of I guess where I grew up on me in that way. Like, oh, I didn't have anything to prove.
Yep.
Um out to like to anyone else. I mean, I had to prove for my own, ego, but I was like, oh, wait a minute. Like, I'm not just doing this just so I don't go back to jail. I'm doing this because I like this. I actually
Mhm.
kind of like this. And to feel people invest in you after, you're going through jail and people are judging you. And it felt like people really wanted to see me win. I was like, okay, maybe I could let my guard down a little bit. And then from there I just took off. I think I got like a 4.0 my first semester, my first year. And then I was like, oh, I want to do the Black Students Union. And like I felt like I could finally cultivate other traits about myself that I don't think I had the opportunity to when I was back in the city. Um, and I think a lot of that just comes down. I think I found my people at HWS, and I felt like people believed in me, and they saw me for more than just the girl that got locked up. Like I wasn't. That was just one part of the story, and it was so much more, and it just felt so good to be believed um, in that way. So I'll stop there because I feel like I just spoke for 5 minutes straight.
No, I think HWS definitely was like a magical fairyland, it felt like, especially coming from places like you with Harlem, me with Philly. Like I feel like I used to just go away to escape to learn, right? And like it wasn't real life, right? Like you walk down the street and the street is like everybody got money and it's beautiful, like the lawns are manicured, the buildings have ivy, you know what I mean? Like it's like this place that you don't really think is in your pathway. So when you get there, it helps you to discover so many different parts of yourself. And I love that you said you feel like you found your people there. Even though I didn't go through a lot of what you did before, but I felt the same. When I went to HW, I was like, okay, like I got people here, especially like granted, it took me all the way to like end of junior year, senior year to really, make those connections. But still, like I felt like, oh wow, like this is really that spot. And I always love that something that always comes out in my interviews is that there are aspects in people's journeys where they're just getting like these, yep, you're right where you're supposed to be. Right. And I feel like you were getting those
Mm-hmm.
checks from HWS, right? And going through such drastic transition, and not just transition in your external environment, but with your internal environment, like you need a lot of okay box checking yes to feel comfortable and to also find that peace that you were talking about. So I think people really just people don't really understand or value how much that peace means to their growth. And I think that what you're talking about is an amazing example of that. We go to HWS, we graduate, we don't got to talk about the middle job. The middle job was just a way station. But what pushed you to go to what pushed you to go to law school? Was it, your experiences that, now like I see what people are going through now, I want to do this, or was going to law school something that was kind of like always a part of the plan, and maybe you didn't think at one point you would be able to?
Yeah, I also want to follow up too. I think what I was trying to say and what we might be saying too, before HWS, I think a lot of my life I lived in survivor's mode. I was just trying to get by and like figure out how to like that's what when you're a hustler, that's what you do. Like you just survive and you just get into the next phase. And I think even at one point getting into college was surviving because I was like, it's either you get into college or you go to jail. And I think once I got there, I didn't need to survive anymore. I could just take classes about African American studies. Oh, like I could just take a writing class, a creative writing class. Cool. Like, and I think that I liked, so to that point, just to conclude it on that, like I didn't have to be so much in survivor's mode. I could just kind of just be, and when you come from where we come from, you always got a little bit of survivor and you always gonna have hustler. Like it doesn't just go away, but it doesn't have to be the one driving the car. It could just kind of like sit in the back, chill for a little bit, and when it's time to come out, it'll come out. But it's nice to just kind of be without all those other expectations. So, but to the question about law school and why I wanted to go, so I'd always I was always told that I would be a good lawyer, and that's not as much of a compliment as people think. Because what it really means is that you're argumentative, you're talkative, you know it all,
I was about to say
like
that's
you
not even like a
relentless.
good thing. They're like, oh, you be a good lawyer.
No,
That's usually after you're like
you-
screaming at something or being wrong.
exactly.
Oh,
And people think everyone in law school has at some point in their life heard the same thing, and it usually means that you were an obnoxious child who is a type A student who like did all the things and was like really great and like all those different things, right? And so I kind of always like was told that, but even deeper than that. So, I mentioned growing up, my mom always wanted to go to law school and she never did. But she knew the law. Like she was so smart, she knew the law. Like my mom was just one of the smartest people I have ever met. And part of it was like her natural smartness. Like she just knew things, but it was really that she knew how to find things. And I think like there are some people that are just natural geniuses in the sense that they can pick knowledge up fast. But then there are people that just know how to find answers. And my mom knew how to find answers. And I think that that is an underrated form or not talked about form of intelligence. And I think that that's one of if there's pillars of intelligence, I think that that's definitely one of them. And she was just always on a quest for knowledge. Like she would listen to audibles. She always be reading books. Like when the Columbia law students, because they would live in Harlem, they would put their books out on the sidewalk or donate them to Goodwill, and she would like get them and read the law books just so she could, because she just loved the discipline of it. Um, but then in real life, like we actually needed it. So uh, she would. I remember coming home when I was a kid. We would have eviction notices, and my mom would go to court and win. And it's so hard for a single Black woman with no law degree to go to court and win against a landlord. And she knew the terms, she knew exactly how to play the game. And then what was so fascinating wasn't even that she won. She would then help everybody else. Like everyone in the building would come to her and then be like, KO, I need help with this. Like they saying I over for this. Can you help me with that? And she would help people be certified. Like she knew all the things, and then it spread to other buildings. Like she was just the definition of an advocate. So growing up and seeing my mom do that, I just it just was so incredible to me because it was like the law is power. And seeing my mom wield that power without a degree was so fascinating. And she would always say, like, getting a law degree doesn't make you smarter than someone, but it just gives you that access. It just makes you so powerful to maneuver in court spaces without restriction. Um, so this was how I grew up, and I have this, I guess, this justice. What is the word I'm looking for? Like the not trait, but value. This value of justice and community service that's instilled in me from when I'm born. Um, People keep telling me I'm that obnoxious child that's going to be a lawyer. So I was a Fulbright and I was in South Africa, and I'm trying to figure out, am I going to go to law school? Is that what I want to do? And I have this moment where my students were protesting the uniform, and they wanted me to be their rep, their lawyer, basically, to administration. And in that moment, while I'm talking to administration, I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. Like, I love advocating on behalf of people. I like helping people see the big picture. I like connecting the dots. I like talking about policy. Like, I think that, and I just felt like I was in my purpose in that moment. So after that, I decided to apply to law school. So I applied twice, actually. I applied to law school, got in, but I was pregnant. And I was like, I'm not going to be able to do this while because I had my son in October and school starts in August. So I wound up saying, like, I'm going to defer. I'm just going to wait a year. So I have my son in 2019 of October. And then 3 weeks later, my mom died. So after my mom dies, my life is turned completely upside down. Like, I'd moved out. I'm living across the water in Jersey. Then I have to move back home. I have 3 younger siblings who now need help because now I'm the oldest. So I take in my siblings, and I have this baby. And shortly after, I became a single mom. My son's dad and I broke up. So all these crazy life changes are happening all at once. And I'm like, I'm not going to be able to go to law school. Like, that's just not going to happen in the next year either. And then, of course, after that, 2020 is when COVID happened. So then everything is really put to a halt. And then after that, my grandmother died a year later, October of 2020. And I was like, you know what? Like, if I don't go now, I'm gonna get stuck. And again, and I had this moment where my mentor, after my mom's funeral, called me and was like, you and your mom had a lot of similarities. Your mother was incredibly intelligent. She had all these dreams, but she could never fulfill them because her heart was big, but it was so big that she didn't know how to put herself first. And there were several moments in her life where she could have achieved the things she wanted, but she fell short because she put somebody else first. And now you are in this crossroads in your life where you don't want to make that same, like, you could either thrive or you can sink. Like, this, he's like, this is like, he's like, and I don't mean to be hard. He's a Capricorn too, so he's a little straight up. He's like, look, I don't mean to be harsh, but like, you gonna either sink or you gonna swim. And this is something that makes or breaks people. There are a lot of people that can't recover from something like this. He's like, I definitely think that you can, but you have to make a conscious decision. You have to put yourself first, and you have to make a plan. And you have to be selfish, and you have to be okay with knowing that you're not gonna be able to save everybody, and you can't be super sacrificial. You're gonna have to be a little bit self-serving, but if it's gonna make the rest of your life and your family's life better, then that's okay. And at the time, I was kind of like, I don't know, why is he telling me this? But okay, but I read my mom's journals that she had all these journals from like 1990 all the way to like 3 days before she died, and she had talked about like all her dreams and things that she wished she could have done, and I think she left that as a lesson for me to really like just make sure I didn't repeat those same mistakes, and that I was selfish, and that I did think about what that selfishness might look like, or what it means to put yourself first. So after all these things happen, we're in COVID, I'm being a single parent, my grandmother passes. I'm like, I have to apply to law school. Like I've been at my job almost 4 years. I think that I've gotten all that I can out of this job. I was doing community organizing. I liked the work, but I knew that I had reached my peak of what I could get, and I really wanted to. I wanted to be in the legal space. Like I needed. I just needed to be in a different headspace. I just knew it was time. I don't know if it was the same feeling, but it was just kind of like this. If I don't go to law school, I think I was 26 or 27 at the time. I have a baby, kids are expensive. And I'm like, before all this, I was going to go back to law school. So I need to get back on course. And I think a lot of, you know, a lot of where I get this mentality from of like, okay, I'm just gonna do this thing that I said I was gonna do. It does come from my mom. Like my mom was just an eternal optimist. And the last conversation that we had, I kid you not, the last thing she said to me was sometimes things have to fall apart to come together again. So I'm at this point in my life where my life is falling. I feel like my life is falling apart. I done moved back home and like I'm not living where I just don't feel like my life is where I want it to be. And I'm like, but maybe that needed to happen so that I could, put things back together again, but in a much better way. So I just tapped into whatever that resilience was and was like, all right, I'm gonna be in law school next year. I don't know how we're gonna figure it out, but I'm gonna be in law school.
I feel like those are just such massive transitions. And I just remember because we are, separated and we're definitely sunk into our adult friendships. And I think, granted, shout out to the pandemic because I think that definitely brought us closer together. But like before that time, I just remember like getting updates from you. And I just could not imagine just like everything that was happening at that time. And it was just like, I remember, wait, this, and then and I was just like, I don't even understand how, you even push forward in those spaces or even just after even one of those things, right? So like I just to just see everything one after the another after another, like I can see how it can be easy for somebody to get a very defeatist mindset about this. Like I like people to sit back and be like, clearly the world don't want me to win. They done gave me all of this shit like this. Clearly something that's not adding up. But I think with you on the other end, it was just like I have to take this and use that as fuel, right? So like, how do you like? I don't know if like this is a real question, but like, how do you even transition that in your mind, right? Because sometimes some people take those situations and they allow it to really like just be on them, and they're just like, all right, I just have to accept it. This is my situation. But I feel like you had something that really was able to make you pivot in all of those instances. And I know you talked about your mom, but are there other things that, you use in order to really, make sure that pivot happens in the positive instead of the negative, like it would probably with most people?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. I think resilience is a skill, and I've been practicing resilience since I was 10 and I grew up in the hood in a low income household. Like I think anybody that comes from those circumstances that gets to where we are, you're gonna naturally have that skill of resilience. Just like you develop skills over time that you may not be conscious of, but then once you become conscious of it, you can actually fine tune it and work it to your favor. And I think I had a natural resilience because I was in survival mode. Because I'm like, I gotta eat, I gotta survive, I gotta get to where I need to get to. And then once I had survived so much and figured out how to thrive, I think I became more conscious of what resilience meant to me. And we talked about this, but resilience to me is essentially like radical optimism. And a lot of times we think about resilience as like the fighter, it's the person that's like, you got grit, you just keep fighting no matter how hard it is. And that is resilience. But at its core, resilience is really optimism because you're not going to fight unless you feel like you have something worth fighting for, unless you really believe. If you don't believe there's a light at the end of the tunnel, if you don't believe that nothing's worth it, then you don't need resilience. You're not gonna tap into it because it's like, well, I give up. And I think that we don't often equate optimism and resilience. Or not. Let me rephrase that. I don't think we always see them as like the same thing. I think sometimes we think of them as different, but I actually think that they are really related. And sometimes we hear optimism, or I will hear it and be like, that's that cheesy like the glass is half full, it's okay. And I used to be like, no, sometimes it's not okay. Like sometimes the glass is broken and there's no water and it's leaking, and that is not okay. Um, but what resilience will do is will tell you that even though the glass is broken, you have tape. So you have tools that can help you repair it. And once you repair it, you can fill up the glass. You may not be able to fill it all the way because the crack isn't fully repaired, but you can refill the glass. And if you can refill the glass, if you can fix the glass, then you can get somewhere. And I think like that's how I started to understand my resilience as these tools. Like I had these great problem solving tools that I could tap into. So like just like my mom, like I knew how to find information, I knew how to problem solve, I knew how to like take a step back and see a situation for what it was. Like, okay, this is a fucked up situation. Like this is the cards that I'm dealt. This is what I have. And I'm a big spades person. So, I'm dealt these cards. This is the hand I have. I don't got no books. I got one book in here. This is just what I got. I got one spade and it's a 3 of spade. That's it. Um, and I can't change this hand. All I could do is play to the best of my ability. And I think that's the first step for me with my resilience is just kind of like, well, the step 0, feel your feelings because sometimes it's just like it sucks. Like I think during that period when my mom died, I was going through everything. I was miserable. Like I was very depressed. I suffered from postpartum depression, and it wasn't like this instant thing where I was like, okay, I'm sad, and now I'm gonna just apply to law school and it's gonna be okay. I was just kind of like I hate that this is my circumstance, and I don't like this. And I sat in my feelings, and I was in my feelings about it. Um, but I knew that I think having a kid helps because you can't. And it's my son relied on me. I'm breastfeeding, so I have to eat because he has to eat. So I think having somebody rely on you, you have no choice but to survive. And I think that definitely helps. I'm not saying I think people should have kids to keep them afloat, but I think that I have to give so much credit to my son because I knew that he was depending on me to survive. So I think, knowing that all right, like I have to get up, I have to do these things. I have to feel my feelings. And then I think after that, there's like community. So talking it out with my friends, like speaking it out, talking with my friends every day. So I don't feel so alone. And I think that helps as well because I think, again, resilience is this thing that we think as the solo person is like climbing their way through the mountain, but a lot of what resilience is like other people helping you along the way and encouraging you because you really can't do it alone. Even in my story, I mentioned like my mentors calling me and people giving me like little tidbits of advice, and that's important. But so is just friendship, like talking to your girls. Like you said, during the pandemic, I think a lot of us realized like, wow, we really miss companionship. We really miss our friends. And you need that. And I think after losing my mom, I was like, I need to reestablish my community again. I need to tap into my friends. Like, I don't want to keep feeling as alone as I felt. So, um, I think accepting this, like being in my feelings, accepting the situation, tapping into my community. And I think once I had those things kind of like just feeling a little bit more like myself again, I was like, okay, I can make a plan because I'm not so much in my emotions. Like I've gotten it out. I've accepted it. Now I can move accordingly. So then from there, I work how I do with any goal that I want to accomplish. I remember my first official job was in McDonald's across the street. And I remember thinking like, I never worked at a real job before. So I got to convince this man to hire me. So my end goal is to get this job at McDonald's. My experience is that I've worked with kids. So how am I going to turn working with kids to skills to work with for McDonald's? And I finessed it. And I was like, look, if working with kids is just like working at McDonald's. People come to McDonald's, they want to eat. When they get hungry, they act like big kids. When you got to manage a bunch of 6 and 7-year-olds going on a field trip on a train, that's just like crowd management on a Friday at McDonald's where everyone got paid. He was like, okay, can you start? And I was like, yes, I can. And I think it's the same thing. Like I'm like, okay, I have this vision. I know I want to go to law school. So how do I work backwards from there? So the good thing is with goals like this, where it's law school or something on a timetable, you have a pre-made template for you when it comes to time. So I think that makes setting the goal very easy. And I think I did. So, I fall into those natural steps and I figured out the timeline. But I think on a spiritual level, I I don't know. Like my mom used to say, I used to say, well, what would I do if you were gone? Like, what would I do if you die? And she'd be like, you keep living. Like, I'm gone, you're not. And I felt like those months where I was really depressed, I wasn't even like I was alive, but I was just a zombie. I was on autopilot mode. I wasn't living. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I have my son, I'm not even able to enjoy my son's presence because I'm so sad. I'm not really able to show up for my friends because I'm not there. And I'm like, man, life is so finite. My mom just died. Like, I don't know when the last moment is for any of us. And I would hate for me to be so down or wherever I'm at that I'm missing out on living my life. So I think that was kind of the beauty in death, or the beauty in the grief of it all, was realizing the value of life, um, and just believing in myself, tapping into that, like I said, that Harlem energy of like the odds are stacked against me, and but I got, like, I know that I could do this. I know I have to go to law school. I know that this is my calling. This is what I'm supposed to do. And I really believed in myself, and I knew that I could, and I knew why I wanted to do it, more importantly. And I just continued to tap in. And I think when all else fails, when you don't have the motivation, this is cliche, but it's true. When you don't have the motivation and that inner spirit that's telling you, like, you can do it, you can do it, you have to fall back on discipline. And discipline is where you set the goals. And when you become methodical, like, okay, I want to go to law school. Here's how you do it. I have to apply to these schools by these days. I have to take this test by this date. This is how much it costs. So even when I didn't feel like I was that girl, I'm like, well, I already paid for the LSAT, so I'm not gonna waste my money. And I already paid for this application. I already started this. So I think when I couple the discipline with the spiritual part of it, then I'm like, okay, I have a plan and I can't fail.
No, I love that you keep mentioning like really having to get right with yourself to move forward with that. But like my question is like how do you get to say how do you remain kind to yourself through all that, right? Because I feel like a lot of people they get not just they get down on themselves, but they just start really not being kind to themselves. And they also don't they that also then turns to feel like they don't worth that additional effort and that discipline that you're talking about. So like how do you and what advice do you have for others for them to stay kind to themselves? Because like people could just fail a test and then now you're just like, I'm a failure, everything in my life sucks. Now I'm not supposed to be here. But we're talking about major losses in your life. So like how do you remain kind to yourself through all those transitions?
So that's a really good question. And the thing is, the one of the hardest parts about losing a parent, and especially a mom, is that you're no longer somebody's daughter. And like, I don't have that person that, when I'm being down on myself, that would send me those little tidbits of inspiration. And your mom's gonna always gas you up and tell you like you the baddest and like all these things, and you lose that unconditional love. And that was really hard. Like I mentioned, that I felt like I had been an adult since I was a kid, but I still felt like my mom was so much of a driving force in my life, and so much of just a grounding force. Whenever I felt like I didn't know what was the right move for me, or if I wasn't in the right space, my mom would always, she knew exactly what to say. So losing that was really hard for me. And I think the remaining kind to yourself, I honestly don't think that I was for a while. And I realized that when you don't when it's hard for you to figure out how to remain kind to yourself, you turn to your community. So, and if you're lucky enough, you have your parents. But that's those moments, that's usually when you turn to your parents, like when you're just having one of those days when you're an adult and you just like, and then the doctor didn't accept my insurance, and then I got this bill, and you just like vent it to your mom, and you just, all this stuff is going on at work, and your mom is just like, oh yeah, that girl is a hater, and like, don't worry, I'm gonna send me the bill, let me look at it and see what I could do, and like, it's so nice to know that somebody got your back even when you feeling at your worst. And so whenever you're feeling like that, your parents usually supplement that, but so do your friends. And I think that in those moments, for myself and for anyone that struggles with being kind to themselves, it was community that really saved me. Like talking to Tati, one of our other best friends, and just your people pour into you. Like even when I talk to you about things and you'd be like, I hate when you beat yourself up about this stuff because like, you know, it wasn't your fault or whatever. Or like when I'm having anxiety, you'll be like, your anxiety just shows that you care. And I'm like, she's right, it does just show. Like that was so reaffirming. And I realized that your friends are the next best thing that you can get to unconditional love from a parent, because your friends are gonna rock with you. They're your friends, they love you. So like, your friends are gonna check you, they're gonna hold you accountable just like a parent would. And of course it's not all unconditional. Like the love may be unconditional, but that doesn't mean like everything is. Like you should have conditions and boundaries with any relationship that you have, including parents. But I realized on this journey, like friends, it wasn't men, and it was friends. Like your friends are the ones that, like you said, when you were talking about me at HWS, you were like, well, you didn't just go to HWS, you thrived and you did this. I'm like, oh yeah, you're right, I did. Like your friends are the ones that are gonna hype you up and like remind you of who you are when you get lost, because your friends usually see the best in you and they accept the worst in you and they uplift you, and that's what that's supposed to be like. And if you don't have friends like that, probably try to find some that do. But that's what I think friendship, one of the aspects of friendship should be. And you know, based on how you feel after you hang out with them. And it doesn't have to be yes men. It doesn't have to be people that's always like, oh, you're so amazing and like you're never wrong. But it should be people that pour into you when you are especially feeling hard on yourself. So I definitely think my friends, my mentors, like I would talk to people about my plans, like, oh, I'm interested in law school. And they'd be like, yeah, you definitely should go. Like you're intelligent. Like you should go. And I'm like, oh, I should go. Like, okay. And I think whenever I'm in doubt, having community, going back to that point from the beginning, like my mom was so community oriented, and that's why. Because it really does take a village to raise a child. And we're ever growing. We're always growing. That village doesn't stop just because you become an adult. So I think that has been one of my secret superpowers, is every place that I'm at, I entrench myself in community. So at HWS, I found my people, but I also was president of the Black Students Union. And then at Fordham, I was president of the Black Law Students Association. Like finding community was so healing for me. And it wasn't just because it was these people were making me feel good about myself because I'm the president. I was in a position where I could give back and I could be of service and I could help other people that felt how I might have felt as well, and like do things like just being in service of other people, I think is how you can ground yourself and feel that again. So I know that's a lot to in answering that question. I guess in short, I would say just when you don't have the discipline or when you're struggling and you're not being nice to yourself, you turn to your people, whoever your people are, whether that's your family, your friends, your cousins, the community service, whatever it is, you turn to your people. Um, and I think that's why so many people on like TikTok creators and stuff, some of them are so happy because they found their people, like they found their content, their niche, and they're so happy doing that work because by making themselves be seen, they help other people feel seen and validated as well. And that is
Mhm.
so liberating to feel that. Like TikTok, you see some of the most vulnerable, raw emotions that you be like, damn, I would never put that on the internet. But then it got 48,000 likes, and then you be liking it like, that is relatable. But and I think like that's how you become kinder to yourself. You need people. And I wish I could say, oh, you journal it out and you look in the mirror and you do affirmations. And I think that that does help. And there are probably some people that probably have that kind of discipline and that works for them. But for me, um, my people always help me like get myself out of that mode, because I can get really mean to myself and it's like, oh, I'm a failure. I did this wrong. And like, I just could get in that place. And my friends are like, what are you talking? Like, I remember we were on a trip and I was like, oh, like I don't want people to think that I'm just out here living my life. I'm just, not working hard. And y'all were like, you've been waking up every morning to work. Like you're working right now. What are you talking about? And I was like, yeah, you're right. So, that's why it's important to have friends.
No, that's so real. And I feel like I always overly appreciate our like little friend clique group thing because like I have a level of like love and just like support that I'm willing to provide at a level like of my actual family. And I feel like I never really thought that I could have something like that. But then also another point to that, I think a lot of times our depression and the things that keep us down like thrives in that isolation. And I think that I hope people really heard what you just said because you know, especially like when I was going through my depression, I talked about that on the last episode. It was very insular for me. And it was like the moment when I was just like, I need to shake out of this, it was to tell other people that I was going through this, right? It was to like, let me call, let me send this out. And like, I didn't even I didn't tell everybody because I was just like, I didn't want to just make it like a PT drop when that day when I kind of had that moment. But I like called Tot and I like left her the most ratchet voice note I probably ever could have sent her. And she just like stopped everything and called me. And we were on the phone for like 3 hours. And it was just like, same thing happened with my mom, same thing happened with Isaiah. So it was just like that point of really having that friendship circle around you. Like I've been seeing that so heavy. And when you're an only child, sometimes you're just like, girl, I don't need nobody. But like so many things over the last years of my life have just been like reaffirming that point. So I really hope, people are like listening to the show and are starting to take things away from this. It's like really grinding yourself and people in your community is really what's going to kind of like move you forward, but then also make sure that you're living your best unedited life. Because like some of the stuff that we say to us, to our own selves, I'm like, I would never say that to you, right? Or to my friend, or I started to put it in the mindset of like, what if my girlfriend was saying this to me? Like how would I respond to her? And I would just say, I know I would never ever say that to you, to Todd, to Alice, to any people like that. So why am I now doing that to myself? So no, that whole clique, and I always say y'all my favorite influencers. So I go to y'all for I go to y'all for everything. But I do want to.
What you said
pivot,
about
right?
no,
No,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was just gonna say the isolation point was so profound, and I think you have such a good way of synthesizing what I'm trying to get at because I'm so long-winded, and I think the isolation point was spot on. Like negativity really does thrive. It breeds off isolation, and you can feel very ashamed when you're depressed or going through because maybe you want to handle it on your own, or you just feel like, oh, I don't want to be the Debbie Downer, and I don't know, whatever it is, we just internalize this shame. So that's exactly it. Like, just I felt very alone going through a lot of what I just described. And even now, sometimes, as an adult, you feel alone, and that's when you turn to your community and you're like, and your community, your people, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, like not only am I not alone, but there are also people that care about me, like, and then you also find that people have gone through what you've been through, and it feels so good to be seen. And I think that
Hmm.
that's really important. Like if you're trying to get out of a funk, like feeling seen can help you uh get out of your head a bit and take next steps.
It's like there's nothing wrong with me. Like we all going through this.
Yeah.
Like all the girls are
Yeah.
going through, because I feel like sometimes that sickness, it will tell you that everybody else is doing okay and that you're the only person who's dealing with this right now, and that kind of pushes you further into that sadness, because you're like, not only do I feel this shitty way, but also I'm the only person who feels this shitty way, so something clearly is wrong with me. So that's why. And it really makes you spiral, right? So like really getting out of your head and getting out of that space is like, it's so important. And like that's a lesson that I'm screaming to myself, like I'm telling myself every single day. Like that's why I've been telling the girls, like, I'm gonna be outside, and it's not just because like I'm trying to be out and looking cute and I'm trying to just find dudes. I need to be outside to get out of myself, because I am just too. I'm
Yeah.
too in here. I'm too in here. So, but anyway, I want to pivot, because I think that other part that the girl needs to be knowing you for is that Miss Africa just does everything, right? She is not only leading law school, she's leading the Volta. She looks like a baddie. She's giving you the tips on how to be a baddie. She has this beautiful son that just is copy and paste of her genes, that is doing great, and he's amazing and smart and loves trains and this counting. Like you have on the front face, and that's what a lot of people see with you, and that's what it's always been too. At least from our time together, like that has always been a thing. Like Africa was just one of like those girlies, right? But I want to like debunk some of that. Like what is one myth about like the have it all girly? Like what is one thing like, girl, it's not like that. This is really how it goes. Because I feel like we see so many girls that try to portray that and they hide that part of themselves. But I feel like with you be like, you were the first person I ever heard that said baddies don't gatekeep. Like, granted, like I heard it on TikTok later on, but you were the first person I ever heard say that, and I was like, "Yo, that is so real." Because I think a lot of the time in the beginning, especially in like a social media era, a lot of it was protected to be like, "No, this is just how I am." But now the girls are like, "No, this was not just copy and paste. This was not something easy for me." So, like, what is one myth that of like the do it all girlies that you want to debunk?
That is so funny because I feel like I be looking at people like Tati Jack and be thinking that about her, like, oh, she's somebody that she like a do it all girly. Um, and then you watch shows like Insecure, and I'd be like, wow, I relate to both Molly and Issa. Like I feel like I'm so awkward and insecure sometimes. So to hear people talk about me like that, and I just be like, I guess, I I think something that's not. I'm trying to figure out how to answer. I guess. I mean, I was gonna joke and say like baddies get played too. To say like and not get played just by like men. I mean just like we all have bad days. Like it's like players fuck up too. Like it happens. Like you, you know, it doesn't matter how put together you look or whatever. You're gonna get embarrassed. You're gonna trip. You're gonna have something on your teeth one day. Your makeup gonna run. Like it like you get played too. Like it's like a lot of this I think the beauty of social media is that you can put out any perception that you want and people could believe it. Like I remember one time I used to be like, how do these girls take all this content, take these pictures? And I found out a lot of them would take content in advance and post later. And I was like, oh my God, that's so genius. I'm like, I used to be like, how do people take these pictures and show up to these events on time? Like, I'm so confused. And I'm figuring out, like, oh no, they're taking pictures early. Like, there's so much behind the scenes that you don't like. Maybe this is what it is. A lot of what you see online is very curated, like just clothing, pictures, like when you post stuff. So I don't know if that relates to me or just everyone in general, but I think like that's something maybe people won't know. Maybe that I'm very self-conscious and I'm actually even though I am an extrovert, I do get a little bit of introversion or like when I walk into a room and I'm at an event, I don't immediately just start talking to people. I kind of go to the corners of the room or I go to the bar, kind of scope out. Like I'm like an introverted extrovert. That I don't know. I feel like these are kind of boring. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think. What are some things that people may not know? Um, I would say, I think it's just like me being self-conscious and just really, I do care a lot about what people think. Maybe that's one that works. Being very self-aware at times and being like, I hope people really like this thing that I'm putting out. And I hope people really like this picture. And not for validation, but I think there's just kind of nervousness about whatever I'm putting out, especially if it's like my art related or like not pictures or selfies. I mean like content or something I really genuinely care about. I think that kind of stuff I still get nervous about. I don't know. Maybe ask some more questions. Let me see where this goes. I'm trying
It's
to
like
think.
weird.
I'm
Let me
struggling.
think if I have if I can come up with another myth leader. So I do want to talk a little bit about Kai, and I would love to know how all the things you talked about like resilience and this radical resilience, like how that affects your motherhood. Like how do you like see that in the ways that you raise Kai? Like I'm curious about what that looks like.
I'm still stuck on this last question, so I'm gonna try to I'm trying to get out of my head. I'm trying to think. Um, you know what? I'll do this. I'll say to answer the last question, the one you previously asked, something people may not know. I think even if I look like I have it all together, sometimes I still don't feel like it's enough, or like I'm still my biggest critic, or like I always feel like something could have been done better, or I have those moments where I compare and I'm like, oh, but this person did this. So I think like that might be something that people don't know. Like for the girls that look like or appear like they have it all together, a lot of that behind closed doors is, you know, I never feel like I've done a great job. Like when I give myself grades, I always am like the highest is a B plus, sometimes an A minus if it's really phenomenal. But I think maybe that's it. And I feel like that's kind of cliche. Like I'm my biggest critic, which is kind of like whatever. But I think that's when I'm just trying. I think just trying to be honest because I know a lot of people see people that have like that have that it girl persona and think like, oh, this person like never has down days or they're always confident or whatever, and that's not true. Oh, you know what? I figured it out. A lot of this is faking it until you make it. And I think and that's why I try to be transparent with whatever I'm doing and I don't gatekeep stuff because a lot of what we're doing, you just faking it until you making it. Even when I don't feel like that girl, most of the times when I'm dressing up is because it helps me feel like that. Like there was this quote by Jackie Joyner Kersee, like when you look good, you feel good. When you feel good, you do good. And a lot of the times when people would see me, it's like, oh, she's so dressed up and she looks so nice. It's like, yeah, because it's not that like, oh, I feel confident, so I dressed up. A lot of it is like, let me put these clothes on because like I'm not feeling my best self today, and that'll help me get there. So I think a lot of it is that a lot of us are just a lot of people we faking it until we make it, and social media makes it very easy to do that. So don't believe what you see on social media. So resilience and Kairos. That one is a really good question. It's kind of hard to answer because I think that parenting is the hardest thing that I've ever had to do because you are never going to be perfect at it. And you're going to be extremely harsh on yourself, and it doesn't look the same across two parents. And it changes. Like just when you feel like you mastered one stage of your child's life, now here comes the second. So, oh, I made it through the first 6 months, and then you got this next 6 months, and oh, now he's able to talk. Now he's walking. Like, so I think parenthood is the hardest thing because one, like you just are never you're gonna always feel like you're doing something wrong. Like it's so hard, especially when you're a single parent, because you just don't have all of these things that you want to do. Um, but I think it's also hard because a lot of parenting is when you're like me, you're trying to be reflective and you're very conscious of your parenting. So and you wind up parenting yourself and you wind up thinking like, oh, I don't want my son to see this habit of mine because you so kids copy you. So like my son will wake up and he'll be like iPad. And I'm like, no, you can't get an iPad. But the first thing I do when I get up is get on my phone. So I think the hardest part about parenting is you realize how much of an active role you play in that child's life. And if you have to change a lot of yourself or you have to reflect the habits that you want for your child to see. I think that's very scary because like, I want my son to be brilliant and do all the things. I want him to be a good person. And so much of the things that we learned in the household, we all become so much like our parents, whether or not we want to or not. Like it just, you see that. So that makes parenting hard. And as it relates to resilience, I think it's difficult because I'm the only one in our friend group that has kids. So sometimes it could a kid. I don't know why I say kids. And I think at times not being able to talk about it with our friend group could be tough. But I have other mommy friends, and I think that it goes back to the community point. Like talking to other mommy friends, it is so reaffirming. So I'm like not going through this thing alone, and I'm getting tips, and they're telling me what works for them, what didn't work, and that really, really helps because everybody is winging it in parenthood. A lot of us are just figuring it out. So um, I think the best test for my resilience has been parenthood, and I think that's why I'm so good at figuring things out today because you don't have a choice when you have a kid. Like you got to find childcare, you got to get them something to eat, you got to feed. Like you have this obligation, you have to do it. Um, and when you have something like that you have to do, you don't have a choice. You could drag your feet, you could suck your teeth, you could complain, but you gotta have to get it done. And when you just are, and I think that's what helps when it comes to things that I don't want to do now, or like when I'm trying to figure out resilience in other areas of my life. I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this thing, but it's gonna have to get done. So let me just let me figure out the most efficient way to solve this. So, and it's cool because I actually think with being a mom, some of the cool like some things with resilience, scheduling. So figuring out systems that work for me, like laying out clothes the night before and meals that are quick and easy. Like I feel like that's one of the coolest things I've enjoyed about parenthood is figuring out the systems and like what works, what makes this more efficient. I'm like, this is gonna make him super hyper for like 15 minutes. This is gonna buy me 20 minutes of free time. Like, and I think that's kind of one of the coolest things to see is like the literal cause and effect of those actions. And then, you apply that to your real life and you can really see a change. So, um, I think it's been difficult, but one of the quickest, sometimes when you're trying to be resilient, you're not always going to see that result in your own life because it's so far out. But with parenting, you are going to see those results very quickly, especially when they're younger. Like you'll see how quickly your children adapt based on what you decide to implement, what schedule changes you do, what I mean, you see how your kids change even when it's daylight savings. Like they wake up earlier or they sleep in later, and like you see that. So I think that um, with parenthood, the resilience, the problem solving is even quicker. It's even quicker, and the impact is even more. I think it has even more of a greater impact.
No, I wanted to ask that question too, because I feel like whenever I observe like you with Cairo, it's like you're very thoughtful in your parenting. I feel like I like can watch you process the way that you're going to respond to him. And I feel like when you're young, when you're a single parent, people don't always associate you being able to be that thoughtful about parenthood. They always think it's just like I gotta do what I can and take what I can get just to keep them quiet and fed, right? And I don't feel like that has been your mindset, or at least what I like witnessed with you in Kairos. And I always appreciate that because it shows that, like, even though I'm doing this in a different way than most people would imagine, or maybe even maybe how you might imagine it for yourself, you're still able to really like parent him the way that you want no matter what. And I think that sometimes people think that you have to sacrifice that. So no, I that's why I wanted to ask that, because you're just such a thoughtful mom, and I just like I watch that, and I think that I really want people to tap into that, because too, like another thing is that we're moving into a space and time where the girlies are just starting to create the families in their own way, and just like hearing that it can be done, that I could be the thoughtful parent that I want at any phase in my life, whether I'm with the partner, whether I'm not, is really important. So no, shout out to you and for being a mom. Hello, I mean, it's so crazy that you're a mom. I'm like, you really got kids, yo. Like one of my best friends has kids. Like a whole person that depends on you. That
Thank
I ain't even
you,
like
and
I just
I
I just feel
appreciate that.
it. Like
My mom was a very thoughtful mom. Like she always got the best gifts. She was very, very thoughtful in that way. So I think I know I inherited that from her. And I try to be very thoughtful. It's hard though. I mean, sometimes you come home and it's stressful. I mean, I'm in law school, so it's really hard. And sometimes I just don't want to be bothered, or like I'm frustrated because I have a lot of work to do and he's getting on my nerves. And I'm not perfect. Like I blow up on him. I do some of the bad mommy stuff you're not supposed to do. I bribe him with food, iPad, all types of stuff. And sometimes I lose my cool, but then I always apologize. I try to make sure that I always say sorry. Like before we got on a call, I was talking to my little sister, and I had to get in mommy mode with my sister, and I was yelling at her, and then I apologized on the phone, and I text her again. Like, I just want to let you know I'm sorry. I got your back. I always will. I just want you to understand how serious this is. And it's tough as a single parent because you sometimes you don't want to be disciplinarian. Sometimes you just want to be fun mom, and you just want to like nurture your kid and like be the loving person. And I think that's why one of the reasons why I think being a single parent is so hard, because you have to be both the disciplinarian and the softie. And it can be frustrating because you want to discipline your kid and then you want to be soft, but then you don't want them to think like you a pushover. It's not easy. And then I think that's my brother's a big help. The babysitters he's had are a huge help as well in this department, but it's definitely not easy. And every day I feel like it changes, at least every week. Um, but resilience, it's a skill. It's really an intentional skill. And I think now that we're at this age, realizing that like you're not just surviving and getting through life. Like, no, like I'm making this choice, like you said, to be thoughtful. I'm making this choice to be resilient. And if this is a value that I hold in my life, or an important character trait to be resilient, here's how I need to move accordingly. So whether that's goal setting, taking classes, or going to therapy, hanging out with friends, whatever it is that I need to cultivate my resilience, whatever my resilience package or plan is, I need to be intentional about what those things are. And it looks different for everybody. And I think that's the beauty of life and all of this. Like everybody's, values, and even if we have similar values, how we cultivate and how we demonstrate them can be very different.
when we were like preparing for the show and things like that, and you were kind of just like spitball some of your ideas, we talked about this idea of like failing upward as a part of this idea of resilience.
So I wanted you to just talk a little bit about like what are tangible things you actually do or can do to really fail upwards, and even just like start a little bit what it even means to fail upward.
Yeah, like I think I said fail upwards, and then I was like, I don't like fail upwards because I feel like that's so cliche. Like everyone loves to say like that failing upward term. But I use say it more like using failure as an opportunity or finding the opportunity in loss. And it goes back to that point of like uh playing the cards that you dealt. And I think tangible so failing upwards and finding opportunity loss. So failure is different for different people. So for me, I think like at different points in my life I felt like a failure. So, getting into law school, but then having my son and not being able to attend, like I did feel like I'd failed then. Becoming a single parent, I felt like that was an internal failure. Um my timeline being uh off base because of COVID or whatever. Again, even though that was out of my control, I still felt like, okay, like I'm not pursuing my purpose, so I'm failing. Like whenever I'm not walking on my path or whatever, like pursuing my purpose, I feel like okay, I'm failing myself. I'm not living up to my potential. And um, so that those are like some examples, and then there's like tangible failures, like you buy something that you can't afford and like now you're in debt, or you lose something, get into an accident. Like there are like things or you literally fail a class, like you don't do well, you get arrested. Like there's just so many different ways that I think like you can fail or just get derailed from whatever it is that you want to do. um so that's one, the definition, and then how to fail upwards or use that failure as an opportunity. I think so the tangible the things I want people to take away in terms of like how to use failure strategically. Um, I think that you have to first feel your feelings about it. So if it's disappointment, if it's anger, if it's frustration, sadness, feel how you feel. And I'll use this example. So my first semester of law school, I didn't do super amazing. So in college, I was like a straight A student. I get to law school and I'm like, I didn't do amazing. And that's like, this is like the typical, this is like the age old story. This happens to so many people. And I get my grades back and I was just kind of like shocked because I was devastated. I have this belief about myself that I'm a straight A student. That is not what happened. So I'm sitting here like, okay, like this is where I'm at. So I was sad about it. I was frustrated. I felt the feelings. And then maybe a couple of days later, I was like, okay, now I need to. So I put a time limit on it. So I was like, look, I'm gonna feel my feelings for 2 days, but then after that, I'm gonna email my mentors and make a plan for how I could get back on track. So, feel my feelings, but I put a time on it. And some people, there's mixed feelings about that. People like take as long as you need. I think, okay, it's not like I still didn't feel disappointed, but I didn't sit in that disappointment. And I had to get myself out of that. Like I had to force myself to be like, because I could have in that moment been like, I'm a failure and I'm not going to do well. I'm not, and mind you, I had a moment where I was like, damn, maybe I'm not cut out for law school. Like maybe I'm not as smart as I think I am. And what did I do? I turned to community. I reached out to my mentors and I was telling them what I felt. And they were like, yeah, I felt the same way. I'm like, okay, so I'm not crazy. Okay, cool. And then we talked through different things that they did. So I was like, okay, let me go back. And then I made a Google Doc and it was like, get your shit together or whatever it was. It was like the bounce back plan. And in the first part, I just wrote, like, I kept it real with myself. And, why was I disappointed? Because there were some things that I knew I did wrong. And I had to take that accountability. Now, there were some things that I did right. And I was like, okay, you also don't beat yourself up. Like, there were systems that worked for you. We just have to figure out where things went left and how to get you back on the right track. And also, like, you took 4 years off, 5 years off from law school. You have a whole kid. Like, give yourself some grace. Like this is difficult. So, it's don't, be a simple on yourself. Don't just be like, oh, it's okay, it'll get better. Like it will get better, but also recognize like all of the challenges that you had. It could have been worse. It really could have been worse. And like these are privileged problems. You're in a very privileged position that your biggest problem right now is how to increase your grades in law school. Like, you have literally been through worse. Like one of your problems was, am I going to go to jail or am I going to go to college? So breathe a little bit. It's not the end of the world. It's okay. So, I feel my feelings. I put a deadline on my feelings, reach out to community to speak those things through. And then I go and I I make a plan. And I like to write things out because it helps me process, but I write things out, and I like to write out the problems so I can see and just be real with myself. And then after that, I go into solution mode. Okay, so this is what I need. I need a better schedule. I need to be able to study this amount of hours a day. I need to start doing this, start doing that. Then I write tangible action steps. Um, and then from there, with the tangibles of I guess like the big picture stuff. After that, I follow up with another mentor or another person, like an accountability buddy, and say, okay, so here's what my goals are. Here's what I need to work with. Again, this is a little bit of an easy example because I was in law school, and then like there's structures that exist to execute this plan. But then I went to my mentor and was like, look, here's what I identified as my problems. Here's what I think the solutions are. Here's how I think you can help me. Can we meet once a week and can we check in on my progress? Can we talk about this? Can we do that? Blah, blah. And then they would give me suggestions for what they thought would work for me. Um, and then after that, I start implementing, I do the daily, I implement the plan. I look at my calendar for the semester, see what I have going on. And I then went to Google Docs and calendar my whole schedule from waking up to going to sleep. Like I put every single thing on my calendar. And even if I didn't follow it, just putting that out there, just the intention, it just is so helpful because it just feels like you have more control. It's like you're like not the victim in a situation. It's like, okay, I have agency. So even if I'm not following my schedule, I'm still the one, like I'm in control. Like I know what I'm doing. Like this is my plan. Um, so make a plan and then you execute from there. And I think that was 7 steps, but to make it even simpler, you identify when you fail, you feel the feelings about it, no matter how they are, but you put a deadline on it. Um, you tap in with your community, your mentors to talk about it, talk through some solutions to ideate, and then you make a plan. You make a plan and you execute. Um, and it sounds very simple, and each stage is going to be complex. Like some places it's going to be harder for you to get out of your feelings, or you may not know how to execute, but that again is why it's so important to have people. Then I think the next thing, honestly, after that, share your failures because there are so many people, and this is why I'm so big on like I love this podcast and I love like the vulnerability we see on social media because so many people have gone through what you're going through and they feel alone and they don't know where to start and they're too ashamed to reach out to somebody. And like the amount of people I've reached out to about things, whether it's school, parenting, or whatever, and they're like, oh yeah, I went through this too. I'm like, oh my God, like I wish I knew that. I would have come to you a lot sooner and maybe I wouldn't have felt so alone and then you could have given me tips like, wow. So I think that, um, after you go through your process and you win or whatever it is, share that. Don't be afraid to share that. I think in every space where I've been a leader, whether it was in Fordham, HWS, I've always been so honest about what I've overcome, what I've been through, the things I failed at, what didn't work for me, because that's how that's how you continue community. That's how you uplift people, not by just being that girl, but by showing people like, players fuck up too, and then this is how I bounce back from that, and this is how you can too, and here's how you could do it even better. Here's how you can do it better than me. Um, and then when you do that, when you allow for that openness, not only does it encourage other people, but then it encourages you next go round when you fuck up and whatever the next thing is, you remember like, well, there were other people that were going through what I went through last time. I'm sure there's somebody else. And it encourages you to find at least one person and it just keeps building that momentum. Again, it's a skill, it's a habit. You gotta get into that. And that's why I encourage people so much to share. Like share when you fuck up. Because it is so helpful, not only for the other person, but for you too.
No, I love that you said that too, because like that was literally the reason why, or one of the reasons why I wanted to start on a bridge. Like I wanted to start a podcast in general just because I love potting, but like I did want it to be something that was very natural to me, that around a dialogue that I felt like was not happening that often. And like similar with you folks, especially in my space, and they see me kind of matriculate very quickly in the space of politics as a young Black woman, and that was like a major thing for them. And people were, oh, you have this going on, everything in your life seems so together. And I'm just like, you don't even understand what the hell is going on inside right now. And I just want, I didn't, and I feel like that having that perfectionist outward front
is a block for people sometimes, right? Because it makes them feel like in order for me to do that type of stuff, that I have to be perfect or that I have to be this way. And I'm like, no, you don't, girl. I know some powerful ass ladies in the city who still go through nigga drama, right? Like women who are deciding on $1 billion budgets are still waiting for niggas to text them back, right? So like they like both of those things can exist, and just because one is one doesn't mean that the other one can't. So like that was really really why I wanted to start this show, just to like really pull back the mags from some amazing people, so that way other folks can see that what they see in front of them is attainable, and that what they're going through is not a reason for why they can't do better, why they can't create the things that they want. So like no, I love that, and I feel like again like that is another reason why I really wanted to have you on the show. That's the reason why I want to have everybody in the Petty Tribunal on the show. I'm gonna get there, piece by piece. But I do want to be respectful because of timing and things like that, and I feel like this is one of my longest interviews, and this still even went by fast, so I'm kind of mad. But I have to I'm gonna close out with two questions. So I do want you to share any of the things about resilience that you want people to kind of be left with, and then I have to ask like the episode question, before we close out. So if there's anything else about resilience that you want to share, you think that you want people to walk away with, like please share.
Couple things. I'm so long-winded. It's so easy to do a podcast where you package resilience and failure as this cute little marketable item that there's a 4-step action plan and you can fail upwards and it will all be okay. And the reality is like that is not always true. It doesn't always work that way. It's not always linear. You may not have community at the time. You might be in a really, really deep depression that you can't get out of. You might need to seek professional help. Like you might need to be on medication. Like failing, depression, resilience is very messy. Grief is very messy. Like the things that we've described were extremely difficult things that I've gone through. And I think with hindsight, I've been able to, I can package it very well. And one skill you learn in law school is this the beauty of objectivity. So I can speak on it in this way that sounds so distant. But at the time, these are very traumatic things that are going on in my life. So, I would hate for somebody to listen to this and be like, oh, well, like Africa just overcame this thing and she never, like, if she could do it in 2 months, then I can too. And it's just like, no, like there are some things that I still deal with and that I still am hurt over, or I'm still working through. So I think that I've just learned how to, keep on keeping on and keep pushing through, because a lot of it is like I have no choice. I have a son. Law school is expensive, so I can't quit now. But I never want to package failure, grief, or hardship as this like marketable item that you see online, because you do. That's how a lot of people sell books. They're like, I overcame this thing and I want to inspire. And it's like, look, a lot of this stuff is really messy, and I still and other people still deal with the things that we're failing at, or sometimes I even look back and think like, well, what if I didn't get pregnant, and like what if my mom didn't die, and like what if this didn't happen? Like I have these thoughts. Like there are moments where I cannot accept reality. Like in fact it's almost like the contradictory nature to tell a lawyer to accept something, because all we do is fight acceptance. Like all we do is fight. We try to accept what we want to accept and prove to you why you need to accept our reality. So it's not an easy process and get in there. And I want to make sure that emphasize that point. You can put systems. I think when you have a system in place and when you do approach it methodically, you can combat some of the heavy emotions, but sometimes you can't. Sometimes you cannot think peace and 4-step your way out of depression or poverty. Like some stuff is really deep and systemic, and you are just you're gonna have to get therapy. You may not have enough money. Like some stuff is just really out of your control. And I'm in a privileged place where I could talk about a lot of this and share this because I have insurance and I've had these privileges. I'm speaking from a place where I'm in law school, but I know that might not be the reality. The people that are in different, just facing different realities and just facing different struggles. So don't I just want to make sure I bring that to light, because I hate when I listen to a podcast or like I'll listen to something and be like, oh, if that person can do it, I can too. And then later I had this epiphany moment where I'm like, that person was also making like $275,000 a year, and they were living with their parents, and their parents bought them their house. Like, so so I think I just try to keep it real about, you know, what privileges and what setbacks that I have. So people know, take what I say with a grain of salt. And the second thing I'll say, I listened to this podcast, and this inventor once said this quote. He was like, um, he used to run cross country, and when he was training, his coach and his dad used to tell him, because so cross country is this long distance running, it's long as hell, it's hard, and his dad used to tell him that at the point where you start to get tired in the race is where everybody gets tired in the race, and that's when you accelerate. And when he said that, I just sometimes just replay, I go listen to podcasts and replay that quote, because that is so true. And it goes back to, community, and people are going through what you're going through, and like people are feeling what you feel. And if we're just thinking about it in the race analogy and competition, like at the point where you want to give up is probably where other people want to give up too. And that moment where you just want to just throw it all in the air, that's when you push yourself the hardest. That is what is gonna make you, that's the difference. That's how you tap into that resilience, is not by giving up, but by accelerating harder than you ever have. And it doesn't mean that you're gonna be tired as hell. Your body is going to ache. You're going to be out of breath. It is going to feel like hell as you do it. But when you get to the other side and realize you didn't quit, and not only did you not quit, you won, you'll be able to actually breathe again.
I think that's a great way to close out our resilience point. And I have to ask the final question. What does it mean for you to be completely unedited, to be your full self?
That it's making me think of the question you asked earlier that I couldn't get out of my head. Like, what is it we don't see? But to be my full unedited self is to make make mistakes, but to be like not good at something. Like, so I saw this quote, or again another quote that was like, sometimes you just need to start something like a new hobby or a new project that you're not good at. Because I think a lot of times, our edited self, we're only going to show the highlight reel. We're only going to show the things that we're good at, obviously. So, you see winners, and it's like this, you've been practicing this thing for so long. Of course, you're good at that. So, my unedited self would just be like, unafraid of failure, and unafraid to just like try something new and not be good at it, and actually suck at it, and like have to go through the learning process. Like, I remember I was trying to learn something, I think it was bowling, and I was like, I'm just not good at it, so I'm not gonna do it. And it was like, girl, like you don't have to be good at it. Like, it's bowling, just have fun. Like, my whole unedited self, just like, I just have fun, and I'm a student of life, and I'm unafraid to learn. I'm unafraid to not know something. Like, when was the last time you showed up to a class and knew nothing at all and was excited about the prospect to like learn, instead of it being like, I'm not good at this, so I'm not gonna like sit up here and take this. Like, I'm not. But just to like learn something new and to be excited, like that childlike wonder and creativity, like that's what I imagine as my unedited self. Somebody that just like, I'm not so worried about what people's perception of me, and are they, I don't want people to use this in a certain way or see me in a certain light, but that I'm just me, and I'm goofy, and I'm silly, and I'm making mistakes on camera, and I'm not editing it, and I'm fine. Um, and I think my unedited self is just, I think I just don't have fear. I don't have fear of, you know, being hurt or being betrayed. Like, I'm just living in this like lovey, I feel like it's very hippy dippy, but I'm just unafraid to just move without restriction, and to give and not wonder like what this person's intention is. Like, I'm just moving how I want to move, and in a good way, and not worried about like, oh, is this person gonna think this? So what? I'm just moving how I move. I'm learning on my own time. I'm unafraid to fail. Um, and what else? I think also just giving back too, like just sharing as much. I don't know. I feel like that's me though. I don't want to say unedited. I feel like that's just me, regardless, edited or unedited. I think, yeah, like I think I don't know. You can edit this part out, but how do you answer this question? Have you ever answered it on your show?
I mean, like the funny thing is, I probably and I'm a one take hold kind of girly, so I don't be editing shit. But I feel like when I answer the question, or like even just the whole thought about this show for me, it's fearlessness, right? And it's just this idea of being able to show up as me, as everything that I am, and not really giving a freak what people think about it, right? Like that is my whole
Yeah,
self. Like that is what it needs to be edited. It is not even just like, oh, like I want people to, I'm worried about the negative, like even the positive side of it, right? It's just like I'm doing this because this is how I want to show up. This is what I know I can contribute to the world, and I'm going to continue to do so because this is who I am. And the only way only way for our world to continue to move forward as it should is if we're all playing our role. So you don't have to like it, but I know that this is my role in this world, and then I'm just gonna keep moving along in order for us to keep getting along, because that's the only way that we're gonna work. If I'm in your lane and you're stepping into mine, like, that's when we have friction. That's when we're not moving the way that we want. And I feel like a lot of times when we do see conflict, and I see this in politics a lot, is that people be stepping out of their own lane sometimes, and they're not kind of living in their true self, and the change they want to make just doesn't make sense, right? And it's like, because you're just doing some shit that's not you. So I feel like, that's how I see it a lot of the time. That's something that I'm trying to get to. That's what I aspire to, like, be all day, because I feel like I love myself. Like I love what I contribute to the world, but like I also am my biggest critic, and I don't want to be that hard on myself any longer. I just want to be like, I know I'm the shit, and this is what I give, and this is what I'm going to keep giving. Cool. What
so
about
okay, that's helpful because I was like, how do I'm trying to figure out what I say. And I think, so to build on that, for me, I would agree and say my unedited self is very self-assured. I'm so self-assured that I don't care if I start something new and that I fail. I don't care. Like, I don't care what you think. I'm doing this for fun. I'm doing this for me. Like, my unedited self doesn't need outside validation to reassure me that I'm smart or I have intuition or I'm resilient. Like, I know that is true because I know me and I believe in me. So anything that I say that I am what I am, and I show up as such. I stand on my truth. And I think that's what being unedited me is. I also think it's like unedited me is all of my experiences, like the girl from Harlem, the girl in law school, the girl I did the Fulbright. Like, there's so much about me that you can't just put me in one box and say, like, she's this type of girl, she's that type of girl. Like, I am the girl that I still got my Timbs and my fitted cap and my bubble coat, and I'm still very Harlem, New York, like, in the scene. But I'm also, I got my sweaters, I got my blazers. I'm into the Molly from Insecure. I'm into that look, like the corporate baddie. um, and I just like, sometimes I'm just like in my lounge clothes, and like I'm in a Hobart t-shirt with some leggings and a bonnet on. Like, all of those things are me. Like, all of those are different pieces of me, and I love everything about me, every experience that I've had, from growing up the way that I did to being arrested, college to now. Like, all of those versions of me are me unedited. Like, I can't, that's, I was that ratchet, let me not say ratchet, but I was that, hustling teenager who was just like, I don't care what you got to say. Like, I'm gonna do what I want to do. Like, that was me. And that's still me to some degree, is like, all right, like, I'm gonna still do what I want to do. Now, my approach may change, but I still have that at the core of me. So, um, we talked about this earlier, but, realizing that it's not about the path that you take, but you are on the path regardless. Like, you don't have to pick a path. You are on the path regardless. It's about how you choose to see it. So I think my unedited self would just be embracing of all of the different me's, all of my flaws, and being so self-assured of myself that no matter what I choose, like, we're gonna be good regardless. Like, it's all gonna work out. I know that I always land on my feet, and I'm always doing what's in I'm doing the best that I can with the tools that I have at the time. And it always works out better and then some. So that's what I would say is my unedited self. It's hard because I feel like we're both typically very unedited people. So it's like I feel like how we are now is pretty unedited.
Right. And I think that like we're unedited, especially with ourselves, with each other, because that's a space of like of freedom for us. It's like when we're together, like I'm my full self with you, and that's why we're friends, because I can be my full self with you. But it's like I want to take that feeling and be able to have that in all the spaces, even in the spaces where I may not even have that comfortability. I am still showing up as myself. And I feel like, especially as a young woman of color, especially as a young woman of color working in fields that are not designed for us, that is not a part of that narrative, right? That I'm just going to show up as me. And like, granted, like sometimes, like, you got to curtail it. And I'm talking to my young mentee girls about, how to show up and things like that, just because, that's not about editing yourself. That's just about showing up as your best self, right? But
playing the game.
exactly. But it's also just like, I want to be able to have that confidence in all the spaces that I'm in. So, no, I feel you wholeheartedly, and thank you for making me answer the questions too. I'm gonna keep that. I'm probably gonna keep that part in there. I'll be like, leave it to Africa to be the one to flip back on me. Like, okay, Miss Lawyer.
But
That's why, like, come on, next
I
year I'll be like,
love.
put my lawyer.
Well, no, because I was like, I wonder how Dom would answer this question. Such a good question. And you know what, too, and I know we have looking at the time. I also think my unedited self would be more accepting of or not more accepting, but no, accepting of the negative feelings too, like, or embracing of, like, life is not gonna always be peaches and cream, like everything's all good. Like, you're gonna have anxiety, you're gonna feel failure, you're gonna be self-conscious, you're not gonna have confidence, you're gonna feel like you don't belong, you're gonna feel alone, you're gonna go through grief, you're gonna go through heartbreak. Like, you're gonna go through these negative things, don't go away. And maybe this is what I was trying to say to that earlier question, like, what don't people know? It's like those negative things don't go away. And you have to get, I think for a while when I was younger, it was like, I'm like running away for that. I mean, that's what you do when you're young. You're running away from pain and you're chasing maximum pleasure. And many people argue that is like the point of life. Like, we are always trying to moderate our pain that we feel. And I think that you reach this point where you realize you're gonna you're gonna ebb and flow. Like, there are some years you're gonna have an amazing year, like, job wise, but you might personally, you may not, right? And that is kind of the duality of life. And you have to, my unedited self would be one that just accepting, like, that these emotions, they come and go, and it's okay. Like, I can make friends, I can make peace with these negative feelings. So the self-doubt, the anxiety, like, these are not things. I'm not a doubtful person or a mean person to myself. These are just feelings that I have experienced, that they come and go. So sometimes I'll have moments where I'm like, I'm really anxious right now, or like, I'm not believing in myself, my confidence is low. But then I can have a conscious thought where I recognize, like, oh, I'm anxious right now, or like, oh, my confidence is really low. But I know, like, this feeling will pass. Like, this is like, the emotion is not like in me. I can like see the emotion. It's kind of like something I can like throw away if I need to. So what do I need to do to feel better? Okay, I need to I gotta dress up. Let me hang out. Let me call my girlfriends. I haven't seen them in a while. Or let me go get a spa day. And you start to learn, like, these feelings, it's not like preventative care. You can't like go to the dentist. It's like going to the dentist every year. Like, no, sometimes you're gonna have a cavity and you gotta get it filled, right? Like, and you live with the cavity, like, you figure it out, right? Like, you take better steps, and it's the same thing. Like, you can take all the steps, you can go to therapy, you can avoid your triggers, but like, you are gonna feel anxiety. But as you get older, maybe it won't be as hard as before. But you actually, you learn to have better tools. You learn how to deal with these hard emotions a lot better. And that's what I feel my unedited self would also do too. Would be more just like, not zen, but just very, like, not so, oh, I got to get rid of these bad feelings, and like, I have to come up with these processes to erase them. It's like, no, like, and that's what I was saying earlier. Like, sometimes these feelings just suck and they don't go away. And you have to learn to kind of like acknowledge that they're there and figure out the systems that work for you to get you moving forward. And I think that's what being unedited, and that's what peace is to me. Like, I'm gonna have to make peace with this. Like, you're gonna be here So how the hell we gonna mitigate this? Like, how am I gonna be able to get what I need to get done? Like, all right, depression, you here? Welcome back, bitch. Like, all right, like you've been here before. I know how to get you out. I know exactly what I need to do. Cool. And then when you get older, some people are like, I know this thing is gonna depress me, so let me not even engage, right? And like that's like another level of maturity, like knowing how to prevent something, right? Like that there is some type of preventative care. But more realistically, most of us are gonna be dealing with like the management of it because it's gonna be there. It's gonna happen, right? So that's what I would say.
No, that's amazing, and I think I'm gonna clip that. Have one of the clips, but no, I appreciate that, and I appreciate this whole interview and this whole discussion because I feel like it really just turned into us chatting, and that's what I always love for the interviews to turn into because I never just wanted to like I'm grilling you. I just want to know how your mind works, especially with these type of issues that we don't really talk about, which is how are we overcoming transitions and what is the mindset that it takes to do that, remain ourselves, and then also become better on the other side of that. So I just appreciate you so much for sharing. I said this in my voice note earlier. I do, appreciate you for sharing your story with me and sharing your story with my audience. And I hope that the folks listening really take that. Number one, I know people want to start following your journey from this. You're gonna have a whole bunch of random new Philly followers, but again, like I do appreciate you for coming on, and I can't wait to have you back on again. Post bar, 2 years a lawyer, just to kind of see your transition over this time, and I think the audience will too. So Africa, I love you. I overly appreciate you. Happy birthday! Happy early birthday! I can't wait for this weekend.
Thank you.
And I just appreciate you I just can't wait to I thank you again for joining the journey. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Love
Bye.
you.
Love you too.
Bye.
And that has been Unabridged. Thank you so much for joining the journey. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe wherever you listen or watch the show. Also, check out our website. That's UNABRDGpodcast.com. We'll see you in 2 weeks.